Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rapid Report, your daily source for the most in-depth political and economic analyses. Today, we dive into a major crisis that could reshape the geopolitical balance in North America. The confrontation over the opening of the new Gordie Howe International Bridge between Canada and the United States. This is a high-stakes escalation involving politics, economics, and energy, with implications far beyond the Detroit-Windsor border. Stay with us until the end, because we'll break down how this crisis could impact financial markets, supply chains, and even international relations. We'll explore three possible scenarios, from de-escalation to a major strategic pivot for Canada. Before we start, make sure to hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our daily analyses. And don't forget to like and share this video with your friends and colleagues to fuel the conversation on this critical issue. Now, let's dive in and uncover the real stakes of this crisis. In this fictional but geopolitically plausible scenario, a major political and economic confrontation erupts between Canada and the United States over the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge, a massive infrastructure project designed to modernize and secure one of the most vital trade corridors in North America. At the center of the crisis stands Donald Trump, who in this narrative threatens to withhold the deployment of U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers, effectively preventing the bridge from opening. The move is not framed as a logistical issue, but as leverage, a calculated attempt to pressure Canada into accepting a set of demands widely viewed as unrealistic and politically coercive. Opposite him is Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who does not respond with alarm. Instead, he signals a counter-strategy that dramatically shifts the balance of power, an official review of energy corridors, a phrase understood in diplomatic circles as a warning that Canada could restrict operations of the critical Enbridge Line 5 pipeline, a key artery supplying oil and propane to the American Midwest. What unfolds is more than a border dispute. It is a test of economic interdependence, political resolve, and the evolving nature of sovereignty in North America. The strategic importance of the Gordie Howe Bridge. The Gordie Howe International Bridge is not just a bridge. It represents the modernization of the Detroit-Windsor trade corridor, through which roughly 25% of all trade between Canada and the United States flows. Automotive components, agricultural products, energy supplies, and advanced manufacturing goods cross this border daily in an integrated supply chain that underpins both economies. For decades, the Canada-U.S. border has been described as the longest undefended border in the world, symbolizing trust and partnership. The opening of the bridge was meant to reinforce that relationship, streamlining commerce, reducing congestion, and securing supply chains. But in this fictional crisis, the bridge becomes a bargaining chip. By threatening to block U.S. border personnel deployment, Trump effectively weaponizes infrastructure. Without American customs agents, the bridge cannot legally function as an international crossing. The message is clear. Political concessions must precede economic cooperation. Canada's counter-move, the energy lever, instead of responding with rhetorical outrage, Prime Minister Mark Carney announces a strategic review of Canada's energy corridors. To the untrained ear, this sounds bureaucratic. To energy markets and policymakers, it is a seismic signal. At the heart of the warning lies Line 5, operated by Enbridge, which transports crude oil and natural gas liquids from Western Canada through the Great Lakes region into Michigan, Ohio, and beyond. It is essential for fuel production in Midwestern refineries, propane heating in states like Michigan and Wisconsin, jet fuel supply for major airports. The Midwest is deeply dependent on this pipeline. Restricting or suspending it would have immediate economic consequences. With a single phrase, Carney shifts the narrative. The United States may control border staffing, but Canada controls energy flows. A reversal of power dynamics. This confrontation reveals a structural truth often overshadowed by the United States' larger GDP and military dominance. Canada holds strategic economic leverage. 1. Control of critical resources. Canada is one of the world's largest producers of oil, uranium, potash, wheat, and critical minerals such as nickel and lithium. These resources are foundational for electric vehicle batteries, defense manufacturing, agricultural stability, energy security. In an era of supply chain nationalism and industrial policy, these assets are geopolitical tools. 2. Midwest economic dependency. The American Midwest relies heavily on Canadian inputs. Automotive parts cross the border multiple times before final assembly. Propane for winter heating depends on Canadian supply. Manufacturing hubs in Michigan and Ohio depend on just-in-time logistics through Ontario. Closing the bridge would disrupt American factories as much as Canadian exporters. 3. Financial markets as a barometer. Financial markets would react immediately. Energy futures would spike. Automotive stocks would fall. The Canadian dollar might strengthen relative to expectations if investors perceive Canada as holding credible leverage. Markets tend to punish unpredictability. If Washington appears willing to disrupt trade infrastructure for political gain, investor confidence in U.S. policy stability could erode. 4. Labor union. Silence. In a twist of political irony, American labor unions, often supportive of protectionist measures, would likely remain quiet. Why? Because blocking the bridge would devastate U.S. auto workers first. Assembly lines in Detroit depend on Canadian parts arriving hourly. A shutdown would mean layoffs, not leverage. 3 possible scenarios. Scenario 1, controlled de-escalation. In this outcome, Trump declares a symbolic victory. Perhaps minor concessions are announced, or rhetoric softens. U.S. agents are deployed and the bridge opens. Both sides claim success. Markets stabilize. The crisis fades. This scenario preserves economic integration while reinforcing a lesson. Brinkmanship has limits. Scenario 2, dangerous escalation. Trump follows through and physically blocks the bridge. Canada restricts Line 5 operations. Consequences: energy shortages in the Midwest, automotive plant shutdowns, rapid stock market volatility, emergency diplomatic summits. A trade war erupts, echoing past tariff conflicts but on a more structurally damaging scale. Political rhetoric intensifies. Nationalist sentiment rises on both sides of the border. This path risks long-term damage to what has historically been one of the world's most stable bilateral relationships. Scenario 3, strategic pivot. Canada uses the crisis as a turning point. Ottawa accelerates trade diversification toward the European Union under CETA. Energy partnerships with Asia expand. Infrastructure investments prioritize Pacific and Atlantic trade routes. The message becomes clear. Over-reliance on the United States is a vulnerability. Over time, North America's economic integration weakens. The United States loses privileged access to Canadian strategic resources. Canada asserts a more independent geopolitical identity. The end of the soft border myth. For generations, the Canada-U.S. border symbolized peaceful coexistence and deep integration. But this fictional crisis would shatter that perception. It would demonstrate that even the closest alliances are subject to power politics. The bridge dispute becomes symbolic of a broader shift. From automatic cooperation to transactional negotiation. From quiet diplomacy to public brinkmanship. From asymmetrical dependency to strategic recalibration. Canada's response signals a new doctrine, sovereignty backed by leverage. A turning point in North American geopolitics. If such a confrontation were to occur, it would mark more than a temporary dispute. It would represent a generational inflection point. Canada would no longer be viewed as a passive junior partner, but as a resource power capable of shaping continental dynamics. The United States would confront the limits of coercive economic statecraft against deeply integrated allies. The Gordie Howe Bridge, built to connect two nations more closely than ever, would paradoxically become the symbol of a harder, more strategic border. In this imagined crisis, geography remains fixed, but politics changes. And once the myth of the effortless partnership fades, the future of North America becomes not a given, but a negotiation. Geopolitical signaling beyond North America. While the confrontation is ostensibly bilateral, it sends clear messages to the global community. Canada as a sovereign actor. By leveraging Line 5, Canada signals it is willing to defend its national interests, even against a historically dominant partner. This sets a precedent for other countries seeking autonomy in asymmetrical relationships. U.S. vulnerability. The United States, despite its size, becomes exposed in its dependence on Canadian energy and industrial inputs. Allies and competitors alike may reassess the assumption that the U.S. can dictate terms unilaterally in integrated supply chains. Global market reactions. Energy futures, commodity prices, and even currency markets respond globally. Investors in Europe, Asia, and Latin America may start pricing in North American trade risks, affecting global financial flows. This positions the crisis as a litmus test for how smaller but resource-rich countries can exercise influence in a world dominated by superpowers. Supply chain interdependence and economic leverage. The bridge is just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface, the U.S. economy relies on Canadian infrastructure, energy, and resources in several critical ways. Automotive and manufacturing. Just-in-time supply chains make the Midwest vulnerable. Even short-term disruptions can trigger layoffs, contract penalties, and ripple effects across logistics, insurance, and downstream suppliers. Energy security. Line 5 provides oil and propane for heating and industrial use. Restricting flow threatens not just the economy, but also domestic welfare in states like Michigan and Ohio during winter months. Food and minerals. Canadian wheat, soy, and critical minerals, like nickel or lithium, flow through the border. A closure affects U.S. production chains for electric vehicles, batteries, and high-tech manufacturing. This deep interdependence creates a paradox. The U.S. can threaten Canada politically, but doing so risks self-inflicted economic harm. Domestic political calculus. In the U.S., Trump's brinkmanship might energize his political base but alienate Midwestern voters whose livelihoods are directly affected. Key state legislators, labor unions, and corporate leaders may push back quietly or publicly, weakening domestic political support. In Canada, Carney's strategic posture strengthens his domestic legitimacy. By signaling control over energy corridors, he demonstrates both foresight and resolve. Canadian citizens may perceive this as a moment of national pride, reinforcing the government's negotiating position. Scenario analysis. Extended implications. Scenario 1. Controlled de-escalation. Immediate relief for markets and supply chains. Canada gains a symbolic victory without material disruption. Long-term, the bridge as leverage precedent exists. The U.S. may hesitate to push extreme measures in the future. Scenario 2. Dangerous escalation. U.S. blockades plus Canadian energy restrictions lead to rapid inflation in affected states. Automotive industry suffers layoffs, leading to political fallout in U.S. midterm elections. Financial markets may experience short-term panic, particularly energy and manufacturing stocks. Long-term, trust between Canada and U.S. erodes. Corporations diversify supply chains outside North America. Scenario 3. Strategic pivot. Canada strengthens alliances with Europe, energy, Germany, France, and Asia, China, Japan, for trade and energy partnerships. U.S. loses leverage over critical resources and supply chains. Global competitors view Canada as a potential alternative partner in critical sectors, shifting the geopolitical balance. Canada's pivot could inspire other resource-rich nations to adopt similar strategies, diminishing U.S. economic influence globally. psychological and symbolic dimensions. The Gordie Howe Bridge becomes more than infrastructure. It is a symbol of sovereignty and leverage. The crisis challenges the narrative of a friendly, soft border, creating psychological pressure on negotiators, investors, and the public in both countries. Canadian use of energy leverage represents a shift from reactive diplomacy to proactive deterrence, signaling that resource control is a legitimate tool of statecraft. Long-term strategic lessons. For Canada, integrated economic reliance on one partner is a vulnerability. Diversification is essential. For the U.S., even a superpower must respect the interdependencies that constrain unilateral action. For global observers, this scenario illustrates the growing importance of resource sovereignty, supply chain security, and energy diplomacy in the 21st century. Ultimately, the Gordie Howe crisis could serve as a case study in modern economic statecraft. Small but resource-rich nations can wield disproportionate influence when global supply chains, critical infrastructure, and energy flows intersect. That wraps up our in-depth analysis of the Gordie Howe Bridge crisis and its potential impact on Canada, the United States, and the world. As you've seen, this is not just a border dispute. It exposes hidden power dynamics, highlights the importance of strategic resources, and shows how political decisions can reshape trade, energy, and geopolitics. If you found this video insightful and informative, make sure to like to support our work, share to inform your network, and most importantly, subscribe to Rapid Report to stay updated every day on the news that truly matters. Your comments and reactions are very important to us. Let us know which scenario you think is most likely and how you would solve this crisis. Thank you for watching. Stay connected, and we'll see you soon for our next daily breakdown on Rapid Report.